Interchange infringement against North Melbourne.
Against
Sydney
North
free kick.
Sydney free kick and 50-metre penalty for an interchange breach. Is that what we're saying?
Yep. So North Melbourne?
No, Sydney free kick.
Sydney free kick.
Sydney free kick. Okay, Hayden, you have your free kick for an interchange breach, and it's a 50-metre penalty, okay? Let's go with me.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Kanga TV, the home of North Melbourne fans, and welcome to another episode where I go through personal therapy and let somebody else talk me off a ledge for the second time. Welcome to the Agony and the Ecstasy. I'm here with my very good friend Deebs, 1/3 of the True Bloods podcast. Deebs, how are you?
Going well, thanks, Mans. Thanks for having me on your new venture, Kanga TV. How good? And yeah, always pumped to get on and talk anything Swannies. Even if there is another club involved, I can deal with that as a once off today.
I think this is going to be more joyful for you than it is going to be for me. So I'm being kind to you. This is the trade-off. You come on the show and we talk about a really painful moment for me and a great Swans moment for you.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't say it was great. I still remember sitting in my seat at Marvel and like banging and having a few beers and just really not happy with what was going on. We didn't celebrate this one. We didn't really, we always say celebrate every win because they're hard to get. You guys would know more than most. But
yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't like a one that we thought we earned this day. That's for sure.
So for those who haven't cottoned on already by the title and by that introduction, we're going back to round 10, 2023, also known as Interchangegate. It is one of the most traumatic games I've ever been to, personally. You weren't celebrating like a win, and I definitely wasn't celebrating either. It was a really big game for North. It was Brett Ratten's first game in charge. Earlier that week, Clarko had stepped aside. We had a pretty good start to the year. We won our first two games. We beat West Coast here in Melbourne and then beat Fremantle over in Perth, and then went on a string of 20 losses in a row, which the media never, ever let us forget about. And about, 8 weeks into that, we lost Clarko. He decided to take indefinite leave from the game, clearly mental health, struggling with all of the noise surrounding the Hawthorn trial, which we're not even going to go there today. So he announces he's stepping aside and Brett Ratten is standing in as interim coach. It was the beginning of what was a really interesting patch for North. Our football was a lot more competitive, but we didn't actually win a game under Brett Ratten. And I would say of all of the entertainment and all of the excitement, this was definitely one to remember for good parts, for the most part for North, but obviously at the end, just a nightmare.
Yeah, it was interesting times for the Swannies too. So to take your listeners back, we had just got thumped in a grand final in 2022. And we were sort of really battling at the start of 2023. We won our first two games, lost a couple, and then we're on a losing streak of 4. And I think we sat 3-6, 3 wins, 6 losses before facing you guys. So it was sort of, it was unseen territory for the Swannies for a little bit, expecting to be competitive again. And we were just a long way off the mark. And Swannies come down to Marvel, playing the bottom of the ladder North. You're expecting big things, but it's sort of interesting the gusto that a team can get when a new coach comes in. Even though it was sort of a stand-in with Brett Ratten, they definitely played with a lot of heart. Sort of watching the highlights, you sort of saw Jai Simpkin go for the jumper with his first goal, the North's first goal of the game, and it was definitely interesting. Swannies were undermanned. We had no ruckman. We were playing Peter Laddams and Lockie McAndrew, and we had no backline either. I think Aaron Francis was playing. Will Gould, who was a notorious name amongst Swannies. He was on the list for 4 years before he played a game. This was one of the 2 games I reckon he played, and I think it was the last one he played for the club as well. So we definitely weren't at full strength, but it made for a really interesting game, didn't it?
It did. And I mean, you wouldn't have known any of that really at the start of the game because the Swans burst out of the blocks. I think you guys got 2 or 3 goals up about 2/3 of the way through the first quarter before North started to claw their way back into the game. And it's interesting because when I was going over the match reports and watching some of the highlights and stuff as well, a lot of this was symbolic of Brett Ratten and the time that he had at North. A lot of the games went in a similar fashion. We let the opposition burst out the blocks. We let them get, 3, 4, even 5 goals sometimes ahead of us. And then the wheels would start turning for North. So pretty much from about the 20-minute mark of the first quarter up until 3/4 time, I would say it was pretty even. The Swans were always their noses in front, but North were really competitive. There wasn't really ever more than about 2.5 goals between the two sides for, majority of the game. And then heading into the last quarter, North just absolutely turned it on. It was Harry Sheasel's one of the most memorable performances from him in that debut season. We managed to get out to a lead, about 17 or 18-point lead, 10 minutes into the fourth quarter before we do this thing. And I've spoken about this a couple of times now doing this. We get a comfortable margin in front and then we don't know what to do. Like we just panic. It definitely suits North to be the underdog. And that was on display once again in this game because as soon as we had a comfortable lead, 10 minutes into the last, the Swannies started to claw back.
Yeah, for sure. And it was you got your midfield was probably on top all day. You had Goldstein getting it done in the middle as he did for a long time. And the midfield was awesome for you guys. Simpkin dominated. Bailey Scott was awesome. Sheasel and you saw Wardlaw doing some things as well. Back then, and it was a to and fro, and then I remember sitting. This game, I was sitting right in front of where the Swans coaches were in the Medallion Club, and I was doing videos. I was like, and then it like got to like desperate stages, and it's like horse, like you got to pull something out of the hat here. It was unreal, but yeah, eventually what was it? I think we got 16 or 17 points down in that fourth quarter, and
Yeah,
we were
17.
looking out on our feet, shot. And yeah, North, as they even did a couple of times last year as well, just the wheels came off a little bit. But even, that sort of leads us in to, the saga per se. I think with a minute to go, you're still 3 points up, and yeah, you might want to talk us through what went down.
Oh, thanks. That's really kind of you. Do you know what? I was sitting by the interchange bench for this game, and because that's where we sit for most games and the AFL members, and I just don't even know what happened. I think the hardest part of this is that it wasn't communicated to, and I mean, if you're sitting on the ground, you don't know what's going on. And the ball is living in the Swans 50. They'd had a few quick goals. They were coming back, as you mentioned, we were 3 points up with, what was definitely like less than a minute to go. And all of a sudden the play just stops and no one knows what's going on. And the next thing you know, Hayden McLean's getting a free kick basically directly in front at the top of the goal square. And we're all just sitting there thinking, what's going on?
Yeah.
What is going on? No one knows it. No one has any idea what's going on. It is so confusing. And that's the hardest part. And I think that is, to this day, it makes it really hard to swallow. You actually in the moment and for like a good 5 minutes after the game, despite I was sitting right there, despite sitting right there, I still absolutely no idea what was going on.
Well, even the commentators had no idea what was going on when I was watching, parts of the game over the past couple of days. They're like, "Oh, is it a blood rule?" And you can see the umpire is in the air, he's like waiting on direction, and then it's like, yeah, interchange infringement, free kick, and 50 meters, and yeah, it was unreal. It's sort of Buddy Franklin played a big game that game, and it was funny. You could still see that Buddy had the love for the game. He was celebrating that, getting that decision like it was no tomorrow. And I just remember seeing it. It's like, come on, bud, you got to be a bit better than that. But it was, geez, yeah, the fallout is just so. I remember even probably talking to you at the time, and it was like, I actually feel so sorry for you because it was like the little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. You've lost 7 games in a row or whatever it was at that stage, and it was just the cherry on top to it's like, are you even going to win another game? It's like
Just
North were battling.
a side note for everyone watching, I think for the past 2 seasons, Deebs has probably had to welfare check me, I want to say like 10 to 12 times.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I
would
remember
say.
last year that Collingwood game last year. I've never been supporting so hard for another team. I was like, come on,
my
you just got to find a way to hold on, and yeah, they found a way to bottle it. But yeah, the
Yeah.
welfare check does go out a few times a year. That's for sure.
I actually did give you a welfare check at some point this year. I think it might have been against St Kilda, potentially.
It's probably Port when we got smacked by 120 points.
Something. I'm just glad I could return the favour at least once this season.
Yeah.
So the game ends, Sydney win by 3. I don't talk to anyone for like 24 hours after, I don't think. I was actually really angry. I was so angry. I was so mad.
Oh,
and I was just one of those things. It's like, how do you let that happen? Like how?
Yeah, it's a real look. We always say you got to control the controllables, right? And that is an absolute controllable. And for the guys on the bench to butcher it like they did, it's really hard to forgive because it's so avoidable. And premiership points, 4 points of AFL footy, and when you win them, they're so valuable. And everyone needs it. The footy club needed it. The supporters needed it, and you just got let down at the end of the day.
After the week we had, we absolutely needed it. The other thing is, obviously, we didn't win a game, like I mentioned before, under Brett Ratten at his time, but we did have a few more close encounters. We lost to Essendon, I think it was the week later or a couple of weeks after that, by a goal. And then we lost to St Kilda a little bit later in the year. We had a 5-goal lead going into 3/4 time, managed to stuff that one up. And then we went over to Perth and we lost to West Coast. That was the week before Clarko came back. And it's just, you wonder, and look, I mean, it's a sliding doors moment, but you just wonder how the team would have felt about themselves had they won that game against the Swans, and then how many of those results under Rats and then later in the year under Clarko, because we lost another close one against Essendon under Clarko too. So and that was Ben Cunnington's last game, and you just wonder how the script would have looked for the rest of the season had we won that game.
Yeah, for sure. And for sure, there's so many of these sliding doors moments in games and decisions and selections. And you always wonder the what ifs. You'd be up all night if you really gave them all the time that, they probably deserve. But it's hard to, justify, what could have happened. But yeah, you got to look at the facts, and it gets back to those controllables. Like, I would have been so filthy with the club. Like, I think that's where, if I reversed it, like that's where, it goes for me. It's like the Swans have been guilty of that with a lot of things, especially like get to the biggest day of the year, and you're talking grand finals and selections and that type of thing. It's control the controllables and make the right decisions. And you can't afford to get too many of them wrong, especially in gameplay. Like that's what makes it so unique.
Yeah, especially for a club, as you said earlier, like wins are so hard to come by, particularly at North, and what that would have done for the supporters, for the club as a whole, for the mindset. And I don't mean to put the pressure on the club like this, because look, shit happens, but it would have, you would think, just changed so much for us. And
there's a key word, Mans, that I go with a lot, and it's morale. It's all about morale. I'm a big morale guy, and you just gotta build it at the best of times when the chips are down. Build morale, and that was just what you call a morale killer.
Tenfold. So that's what kind of happened for North after that game. I think it was a huge sliding doors moment, which we just absolutely stuffed up. I think that was a big moment for the Swans too, because it seemed to turn things around in your season as well.
Yeah, it started to. It was a funny season, 2023. There was so much hate on us and Geelong as well for playing in the grand final the year before, and then, not playing the best footy the following season. And like, the premiers and grand finalists not making finals, and we battled our way back. And this is the thing that I always get frustrated with as a Swans supporter is I just don't think we get our dues when we are playing good footy, but they'll come down on us like a ton of bricks when we're not. So that was all the talk. Oh,
Yeah.
Swans aren't going to make finals, sitting 3 and 6, but we did manage to turn it around that year and went on a bit of a tear and snuck into finals, ended up playing Carlton in a final and just losing by a goal. But yeah, if we didn't win that game, we don't make finals. So there was a big sliding doors moment for us as well.
Now, another interesting little tidbit out of that game, you mentioned George Wardlaw earlier. That was his debut. And there is an iconic piece of footage where he absolutely tackles Luke Parker like he's never tackled anyone before. And it's funny now, 18 months on, that footage has been wheeled out once again as they are teammates.
Yeah, it's a sticky point. We player who's played 290 odd games for the club. It just doesn't seem right to see Luke Parker in other colours. But yeah, he was a great servant of our footy club, gave his all. One of the last, we will be one of the last premiership players on our list in 2012. But yeah, you can't begrudge him for going to North. A couple extra years on a deal. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. It all makes sense. He's originally from Melbourne. Yeah, it's not ideal. I don't like when things sort of end that way. But yeah, we wish Parks nothing but the best, and hopefully goes a bit better than a few of the other trades that we've had with you, which I could have said to you last year. I think we've been pretty active together, the Swans and North, over the past couple of years, but that pick 22 looks all right this year. I'm pretty happy with that.
It's interesting. I wonder, and I hate to do this to you, but consider what I've just been through. I'm doing it. Had you won the premiership this year, do you think that Parks potentially would have either stayed or retired rather than come over?
I think he still probably would have left, to be honest.
Okay.
It's funny. We talked about it all year. There's a 3 or 4 week period when he was playing twos and just wasn't getting selected because we were flying as a unit, which is so odd. Like you got to remember that we were 3 games clear on top of the ladder. And no one was breaking into that side, and 6 weeks is a long time in footy. And you just think back to what Luke Parker was going through. I still remember it. I was at my mate's wedding, and we were playing Carlton of a Friday night, and Luke Parker was down in Frankston playing twos. Down in Melbourne playing twos on a cold Friday night. I just remember thinking it to myself. It's like, geez, that's got to sting, right? But he found a way back into the side and played some good footy. And but look, I don't think we were ever giving him, a 2-year extension on top of next year. So you don't begrudge him, you understand it, but hopefully he can do a bit for your midfield and leadership and experiences. From talking to the CEO this year, Tom Harley, one of his sayings is there's no time like time on the block. And Luke Parker's got that in droves. He's been to grand finals. He's won one. He's been a part of lost ones. He knows how to win finals, and what that can bring to North is huge. You can't buy that type of experience. So you wish him all the best, but it's going to be hard to see him in the blue and white. That's for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's, we went through it when, Wellesley went to Collingwood or Drew Petrie, the club made the decision to move him and 3 others on, and he ended up going to West Coast. That was strange watching Todd Goldstein at Essendon, terrible. But, I think it's a sign of improvement, and I think you've got to make these tough calls if you are in a position that you're in. And I think that for the Swans, that is one thing, is that they're always around the mark. It's very, very rare that you have a clear September at South Melbourne. And I think that is just part and parcel of it, always looking for that success as a group, and you've got to kind of make those tough calls. Footy, it's really interesting because I think footy is such an emotional, meaningful game for the supporters, but at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, you've just got to treat it like a business or you're never going to get better.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better myself. It's dog eat dog world out there, and it goes both ways. Sometimes players are ruthless, and sometimes clubs are ruthless, right?
Yeah.
And I think Luke's probably made the right decision for him and his family, and you completely understand it. But it's like we spoke about it during the year. We're like, oh, if Parks plays next year, what if some young guy comes on the scene, plays really well, that sort of half forward, on the ball roll. And then, they're like, oh, we got to look to the future. And Parks, he's back in the twos and he's out of contract. So, yeah, you can see what could have happened. But yeah, wish him nothing but the best. And it's, it's a dog eat dog world.
It is, and he did come across with Jacob Constanti. He hasn't made his debut yet. Have you heard much about him? Seen anything you can give us a bit of insight into?
Yeah, not heaps, but what I would say is we have a pretty good record of playing players when they're ready. We don't. No one's really gifted a game at the Swans, and Constanti in his couple of years with us, he was taken as a round one pick, I reckon, a couple of years ago.
He was.
And he was never able to break in. And, there were opportunities, so like probably similar play to sort of Papley. And, Papley's had his injury concerns over the past couple of years, and he was just never to the level. So it was pretty similar to sort of the Dylan Stevens stuff last year. It's like when you guys were obviously super excited to get Dill Stevens, where, that the inconsistencies in the game, it's like he was given plenty of time at the Swans 6 years or 5-6 years. And, wasn't able to get that consistency. So I would say, like, I back our system hugely, and you don't see too many young guys come through and not make it at the Swans and then make it at another side. So, look, the jury would be out on Constanti, but there's definitely talent there, no doubt, to go first round. But what he can bring to North, I'm not too sure. I'm not a big. I got into the VFL a little bit more this year, doing a bit of background, but yeah, don't have heaps for you on Constanti.
I guess this is the time we'll tell things. Deebs, I'll put you out of your misery. Won't talk about Luke Parker anymore.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. If anyone wants to stay up to date with you and True Blood, where can they find you?
Can find us on we're on your social medias, your Instagrams, your Facebooks, your Twitters or X. There's even some new one Polly told me the other day getting around. We're on that too. And we're on your TikToks. So give us a follow, especially, when we play North, the previews. And I do that with a lot of other podcasts, just get fan opinions on what they think of us. And so we do one of them every week. And yeah, looking forward to that next year. But thanks for having us on, Marnie. You're doing a great job here, and I'm sure Kanga TV is going to take off in 2025.
Thanks, Deebs. I'm sure you'll get a number of welfare checks next year, not just from me, but from a few people watching as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Thank you.